Chapter 3, A Search and an Evocation. Fiction does give some sort of ideas of what can be done spiritually as the real, but let's remember where we get our guidance in terms of what truths are. Charles Ward, as we have seen, first learned in 1918 of his descent from Joseph Curwen, that he at once took an intense interest in everything pertaining to the bygone mystery, is not to be wondered at, for every vague rumor that he heard of Curwen now became something vital to himself, in whom flowed Curwen's blood. No spirited and imaginative genealogist could have done otherwise than begin forthwith an avid and systematic collection of Curwen data. At his first delvings, there was not the slightest attempt at secrecy, so that even Dr. Lyman hesitates to date the youth's madness from any period before the close of 1919. He talked freely with his family, though his mother was not particularly pleased to own an ancestor like Curwen, and with the officials of various museums and libraries he's visited, and applying to private families for records thought to be in their possession, he made no concealment of his object, and shared the somewhat amused skepticism with which the accounts of the old diarist and letter writers were regarded. He often expressed a keen wonder as to what really had taken place a century and a half before at the Pawtuxet farmhouse, whose site he vainly tried to find, and what Joseph Curwen really had been. When he came across the Smith diary and archives, encountered the letter from Jedediah Orne, he decided to visit Salem and look up Curwen's early activities and connections there, which he did during the Easter vacation of 1919 at the Essex Institute, which was well known to him from former sojourns in the glamorous old town of crumbling Puritan gables and clustered gambrel roofs. He was very kindly received and unearthed there a considerable amount of Curwen data. He found that his ancestor was born in Salem Village, now Danvers, 7 miles from town, on the 18th of February, 1662 to 1663, and that he had run away to sea at the age of 15, not appearing again for 9 years, when he returned with the speech, dress, and manners of a native Englishman, and settled in Salem proper. At that time he had little to do with his family, but spent most of his hours with the curious books that he had brought from Europe, and the strange chemicals which came for him on ships from England, France, and Holland. Certain trips of his into the country were the objects of much local inquisitiveness, and were whisperingly associated with vague rumors of fires on the hills at night. Curwen's only close friends have been one Edward Hutchinson of Salem Village and one Simon Orne of Salem. With these men he was often seen in conference about the common, and visits among them were by no means infrequent. Hutchinson had a house well out toward the woods, and was not altogether liked by sensitive people because of the sounds heard there at night. He was said to entertain strange visitors, and the lights seen from his windows were not always the same color. The knowledge he displayed concerning long-dead persons and long-forgotten events was considered distinctly unwholesome, and he disappeared about the time the witchcraft panic began, never to be heard from again. At that time Joseph Curwen also departed, but his settlement in Providence was soon learned of. Simon Orne lived in Salem until 1720, when his failure to grow visibly old began to excite attention. He thereafter disappeared, though 30 years later his precise counterpart and self-styled son turned up to claim his property. The claim was allotted on the strength of documents in Simon Orne's known hand, and Jedediah Orne continued to dwell in Salem till 1771, when certain letters from Providence citizens to the Reverend Thomas Bernard and others brought about his quiet removal to parts unknown. Certain documents by and about all these strange matters were available at the Essex Institute, the courthouse, and the Registry of Deeds, and included both harmless commonplaces such as titles and bills of sales, and furtive fragments of a more provocative nature. Now, you don't have to perform witchcraft or admittedly worship things other than God to interact with them, or for your actions to be entertainment, whether or not you know they exist. There were 4 or 5 unmistakable allusions to them on the witchcraft trial records, as when one Hepzibah Lawson swore on July 10th, 1692, at the court of Oyer interment under George Hawthorne,